I'm going to show you in this video how I created feathers recently for an angel's wings. It would work for bird feathers as well. And I'm also going to show you some shingles because it's related. So I'm going to start with Design Sew's quilt, start new, and I just want a block pattern. Let's just enter the rectangle manually. You can stay with the 10 by 10 if you want. I'm going to go 12 by 12 because I'm just going to use the one block throughout. Continue and finished. I want to add the arc out of the geometric catalog, and I have made some shallower ones, but I'm going to just show you, I guess I haven't with just this one. I'm going to show you how to make a shallower arc. Continue. I'm going to grab one end and pop it into the corner on my block, and then I'm going to stretch. I'm going to snap the end that's already on the point and then up here. Okay, now I'm going to hit update, because if I don't hit update, it's going to make my changes based on how this design came in out of the catalog. So I'm going to say update, and then I want this to be shallower, so I'm going to work on the height. And I could just use my minus key if I want to, or I could go in to the keypad or the number pad and change it. Let's go to 0.75. That's probably too shallow. I'm just going to play here for a minute, and then I'm going to move it back up just to my corners. And I'm doing that because I'm going to stretch it again. So I'm going to select stretch. I'm going to go one corner. I'm going to grab the other corner and pull it down. And actually that worked out. I wanted to show you a problem if my arc was not shallow enough. So let's just go up to, move it again. Okay, and I'm going to stretch and stretch this down to the middle. And what I wanted you to see was right here where my arc is going outside of the block. I don't want that. I want my arc to be shallow enough that it stays inside the block. So let's just undo and go back to height. Now I'm going to move it back up here and stretch again and down to here. Well, I could still go a little bit more, so I'm going to undo, and my height again, I'm going to come down just a little more, move it back up so it's snapped into the corner, stretch, grab, anchor in that point, drag this one down to my center point, and it is inside the block now. So this is one side of my bird feather, and I'm going to say finished, and no, I don't want to add another. I'm going to copy this pattern, continue, and I'm going to flip X so I get a mirror image of it. I'm going to move this over and snap it right there and say finished. And I'm going to combine my pattern. I'm going to start with the one on the left, continue, select the one on the right, and I could have switched my start and end points before, but I can do it right here and say continue and finished. Okay, so that's a fine feather. I just don't want that point on the bottom. So I'm going to say finished here. Whoops, I did not want to say finished here. Add edit pattern, and the double arrows, I'm going to go over to smooth pattern, and I want to smooth this pattern, continue. And I actually don't want to smooth the whole thing. You could see what happens, but I can drag my start and end points so that I reduce the area that's going to be smoothed. And now I need to change my smoothness percentage or nothing will happen. And you can see it smoothing right here. The red line is showing what it is now. The green line is showing what it's going to be. I'm going to click smooth. Now that's not bad, but I could smooth one more time. You can keep doing it as many times as you want. And then I'm going to say finished. Now I'm going to zoom out and finished again. add edit pattern, and I'm going to repeat the pattern. I need a couple of these for what I want to do. So I'm going to repeat on the X one time, and I'm going to repeat on the Y. I'm sorry, the repeats on the X are 2, and I want 2 repeats on the Y, and finished. Now I'm going to modify my bottom row, and I'm going to drag it over, and I want to snap this point right here onto the feather above it. And let's finished. I'm going to just move that block out of the way. Modify. Okay, so I could go with just that for the feathers, but I decided I wanted a vein in my feathers. Finished. So I'm going to say add pattern, block pattern, use the current block, and this time I want my line. If you've made a ray line, which is 2 lines together where you switch the start and end points, that would work well here, but it's not necessary. I'll show you how I'm getting around it. I'm just going to say the line and continue, and I actually want to rotate this. Let's try 0. That's flat, so nope, I want it at 90 degrees. I want it straight up and down. And I could have done that by dragging it, but I'm going to move my line, and what I want is to snap it. Let's just zoom in. I want to snap it up here where I have 2 of my feathers meeting, and I actually want the end point to snap up there since I'm not doing a ray line. And now I can play with this. I can stretch, and I can make that line for the vein come down as long as I want, or I can just leave it as it was. So when you're happy with it, we're going to say finished, and no, I do not want to add another pattern. So now I just need 1 repeat of this pattern. So I'm going to combine this pattern, continue with this pattern, continue, and notice this was my end point here, and this is my start point for my next line. For my next pattern, I'm going to say continue, and it's asking me how I want to combine them. I want a continuous stitching line. And that basically does the same thing as a ray line would have done, and it works because I'm not going off at an angle somewhere. And finished. And just to clean this up so you can really see what I have here, I'm going to delete all my extras. Yes. So that's my pattern that's going to give me my bird feathers. I'm going to say finished, and I'm going to save that pattern. So save a pattern from the quilt, select it, continue, and you need to give it a name. So I'm going to just call it bird feather. I'm actually using it on an angel, but it works either way. Enter, and I'm putting it in my catalog. That's where I put anything to start with that I'm working on. So now it's there in my catalog. And I could delete that, or I can move it. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to zoom in now on my block pattern again. I'm going to edit a pattern, add pattern, pantograph pattern. I'm going to use the current block, and I'm going to go up to my catalog. You can see my other ones that I made when I was actually quilting this. And I'm going to grab my bird feather, continue, and I want the bird feather for my even rows as well. Okay, right now it came in at 12. I don't want it at 12. Let's change the row height. Let's just say 1 inch. Okay, that's fine, but I don't want my feathers all lined up like that. I want to offset them by 50%. And I'm going to zoom in so we can see this. And I don't want them hanging here like a swag. So I'm going to close my gap up. I'm going to zoom in closer so I can see if it's just touching. So I still have a little bit of a gap there. If you want the gap, that's fine. Okay, there we go. Finished. Zoom out. So now I could just sew it this way, but I want to make this into a whole pattern so that I can manipulate it. So I'm going to combine all of those rows, and I'll have made a fill. So I could have made my block much bigger so my fill could be bigger, but this is going to work for what I want to do. I'm going to say accept on the continuous. Yes, I do want to commit the changes. Okay, so now I'm going to alternate my rows so it's going to sew across this way and then back this way and back this way. And I could do it by just doing combine pattern, but I discovered something, and it's either lazy or efficient, depending on how you look at it. If you've read the book Cheaper by the Dozen, he was a time motion expert, and he said he always went and found the laziest person to find the most efficient way to do things. So this works for me. I'm going to say sew quilt. I'm not really going to sew it, and I'm going to select my first pattern. I don't really want that one, and say continue, and then I'm going to go to my panto sequencing assistance, click on that, and I'm going to say alternate, and it really doesn't matter what you choose in here for your tie off or your continuous or jump, because we're not going to use it. So, and then done, and then I'm going to back out of here, and I'm going to go to add edit pattern and combine pattern, and notice my start and end points are now all alternating, so I don't have to keep clicking swap start and end. I just did it all in one shot. So I'm going to click the first row I want to stitch. I'm not going to worry about this little tiny bit up here, and continue. Then my second row and continue a stitching line, and this one, let's see, I don't have to do the swap start and end point, so I'm saving one click every time. Continuous, continue. I'm just going to work all the way down through this to make it into one pattern. And I'm not going to worry about that last partial one there. And finished. So now if you wanted to, you could save this as a pattern so that you don't have to keep remaking it. But it's just one big pattern now. I'm not worried about those little bits there. And move. Okay. So now I want to show you how I used it. Finished. I'm going to go add edit block, add block, and when I was at my machine I actually just said standard block and mark on quilt. I can't mark on quilt because I'm on the stick, but I do have the block that I marked on my quilt, so I'm going to load it from my block catalog, and it's my angel wing. Continue. Okay, and that's my actual size. So now I'm going to say finished because I would have just marked this on my quilt. Finished, add edit pattern, modify pattern, and I want this pattern, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees and move it so that it's over my block. Now this is where the fun starts. I can scale this, so if I wanted my feathers to be smaller in my angel, and I will say as far as I'm concerned, my feathers are not to scale in my angel, but nothing else is in that quilt. But I've never seen a real angel, so I have no idea how big their feathers are. Let's see, true size. Those are pretty small, but that's okay. I'm going to move this again. Now, if you think about a bird, a lot of times the feathers up on its breast or closer to its body are smaller, and as you get out further they're bigger and longer. So I went to Distort and I started playing. Whoops. I kind of looked at how the shape of the wing was going, and I played with my feathers so that they weren't necessarily just stacked one on top of another. They are radiating out. And then you're going to look at your edges, and when you're happy with it, say finished, finished, add edit block, add block, clipping block, and I want to clip this pattern, continue, select an existing block, that one, continue, and there's my feathers filling in my wing. And you can see it a little bit. They're narrower up here and they're wider down here. I say finished, and yes, I'm fine with it clipping away. And you can look and see how many jump stitches are and where they are if you want by changing your transition type. There's 17, but because this pattern goes back and forth this way, for the most part it's not stitching back and forth over the same spot over and over again. So I was able to go continuous without having a lot of thread buildup. I was also using a 50 weight thread. I'm going to say accept, yes, and there's my feathers that filled in my angel wings. So it was just kind of fun, and I saved the pattern because I can use it for birds if I ever have them. But I can resize. I could have resized that. I could have shrunk it. I could have made it bigger, and that's what I wanted to show you with shingles. Alright, I've deleted everything off my screen so that I'm starting fresh other than the block, so you would just add edit block. It's still my 12-inch block that I created earlier. And I want to show you shingles because there's a couple other little tricks in here. I'm going to say add edit pattern, add pattern, pantograph pattern, use current block, and then I have an angled shingle that I created, and all it is the line out of the geometric. I played with the angle on the side until I was happy with it. Then I had the next line pattern horizontal. Then I copied my left side and I flipped it on the X axis and put it on this side, and then combined them all. So I'm going to do this one, continue, and this one, continue. And it's 12 inches high, so we're not seeing it. So let's go. I want lots of shingles. Okay. But I don't want them like that. I want them offset at 50%. So there's what I wanted, but I zoomed in to the true size, and that was bigger than what I wanted for the house that I was working on. So I said, okay, let's make it smaller in here. Well, you can't go smaller than the 1/2 inch because you get this warning size limit reached. But I can go smaller if I fool the computer. So I'm going to just say finished and accept and yes. I'm going to go zoom out so I can see the whole thing. Okay. And now I want to combine all of this into one big pattern just like I did with my feathers. And again, I'm going to cheat because then I don't have to say swap start and end point every single time for every row. Say sew quilt. I'm going to choose my first row, continue, and then I'm going to use panto sequencing assist. I'm going to say alternate. It doesn't matter what you choose here because we're not actually doing it. This time I'll say jump and done. And then we're going to use the back arrow to get out of here. Add edit pattern, combine patterns. And notice my start and end points are alternating all the way down. So I'm going to choose my first one, continue, second one, continue, continue a stitching line, continue, continue a stitching line, continue, and just all the way down so I have one big block of shingles. Just keep going and going. So you're going to want to make sure your block is big enough. In this case, I wanted my shingles half this size. So let's say I wanted to fill a 6-inch space. I want to make sure my block was at least 12 inches. It's always better to have it bigger than smaller. think I said I wanted my shingles 1/2 inch, and that's what they are, but I meant I wanted them half this scale. So this is as small as I could go with the pantograph. And I'm finished now. But now that it's all one pattern, I can say modify pattern. Let's zoom in to see the true size. Okay, so that was the size it was at 1/2 inch. I'm going to say continue, but I can now scale it to 50%. So that would mean my 1/2 inch just became 1/4 inch. So I can beat the system. All right, so there's my shingles, and I would do the same thing as I did before. If I just wanted them this way, I would click out my block on my quilt. I would do it as a clipping block. I would position this where I want it and clip away all my extra. But what if the building you were working on had perspective? We could use Distort again for that. Say Distort. So if you were looking at this house from the ground or from the side, then we can now make our shingles have some perspective. Out. Okay, finished. Let's just do a clipping block on this. You could do this with fish scales too. I would do a curved then. Your half circle. Add block, clipping block. I want this pattern. Continue. And let's load a block from the catalog. Oh, let's just do this one. It sort of looks like a roof, but I'm going to rotate it. Let's go there. And I can scale it. I would be marking on quilt though if I was actually using this on a quilt. Move. Let's go width. Not you. This one. And see, I didn't do update, so you see what's happening. It's changing my width based on how that block came in. So if I update and change my width, let's just go to 6 inches now. You see how it goes the way I expect it to? Anyway, I can now clip that if I want. This is not... It's kind of weird here, but I think you get the idea. So zoom in, true size. But I managed to get smaller shingles than what I would have gotten using the pantograph pattern, and if I wanted to, I can add perspective into my quilting. I think there's a lot of things you could do with this, like I already said, fish scales, lines you could have and get perspective like it was going off into the horizon. So play, imagine. You can do so much with this program.